Thank you. Can you all hear me? I can hear myself. All right, cool. So I'm Patrick Lee. I'm a co-founder and the former CEO of Rotten Tomatoes, and today I'm going to be talking about focus. So quick introduction. I'm an American-born Chinese. I went to UC Berkeley where I majored in cognitive science, and I'm a serial entrepreneur that has made a lot of mistakes. I've started 6 companies, of which Rotten Tomatoes was the third. The other 5 companies failed. I've failed far more than I've succeeded. And the most important lesson I've learned is focus. Entrepreneurs should be focused on answering one question. Do people want this? And they should try to answer this question as quickly and cheaply as possible. The goal is to get to product market fit. I personally define product market fit to be when a product is so good that people tell other people about it without being asked to. In other words, the product sells itself. Think Game of Thrones or Stranger Things. With Rotten Tomatoes, for example, we saw early signs of product market fit when the site was featured on Netscape and Yahoo. Roger Ebert listed Rotten Tomatoes as one of his favorite movie websites in an article he wrote, and we saw a spike in traffic the day Pixar released A Bug's Life, and it was coming from Pixar. And this was all within the first year of launch. And because of these early signs, we went out and raised money and ran Rotten Tomatoes as a real company. Okay, so now that we know the goal, what are the common problems that entrepreneurs face when trying to focus? I've identified 7. Over research, busy work, being a perfectionist, too many projects, everything but the kitchen sink, a solution looking for a problem, and premature scaling. Let's dig into each. Problem 1, over-research. Spending too much time on competitive research and worrying about the competition and not actually figuring out product market fit. Don't spend more than 1 week doing competitive research. Otherwise, you're just going to convince yourself not to do it. Any idea you have, someone's done the same thing, roughly 95% the same as your idea. And typically, those companies fall into one of 2 buckets. Either they're huge, in which case you see them, you're like, they're doing my idea, and they're huge. I guess I can't compete, so I shouldn't do this idea. Or they're dead, in which case you think, they just did my idea, and it didn't work. It must be a bad idea, and you give up without even trying. But think about Google. When Google started, Yahoo was already out there, and Yahoo was huge. On the same time, Excite, which was another search engine, was dead. Or think about Facebook. When Facebook launched, MySpace was huge at the time. At the same time, Friendster, another social network, was dead. If you are starting a company, spend 1 week maximum on researching the competition, and then focus on finding product market fit. Problem 2, busy work. There are many ways to be busy working on your company. Answering email, researching, fundraising, working on your PowerPoint presentation, working on your business plan, going to pitch competitions, figuring out your company name and logo, finding office space, setting up legal and finance, filing patents, and so on. None of these things are helping you find product market fit. Problem 3, being a perfectionist. These are the entrepreneurs that never launch because they are never satisfied with their product. They keep adding things, fixing things, changing things. They see a competitor add a feature, they add that feature. They decide something doesn't work, they pivot the product. The whole time never launching. Trying to make the perfect product without actually putting it out there to get feedback from the customer. Why do they do this? By nature, entrepreneurs want to be perfect, which makes them afraid of failing, afraid of making mistakes. But no one starts off great at something. Think of sports or playing an instrument. You're going to suck in the beginning. The only way to get better is to start and to practice. And similarly, with a product, the only way to learn and improve is to launch. Problem 4, working on multiple projects at once. This means there's less time available for you to find product market fit for any one company. And yeah, maybe Elon Musk can pull it off, but you are not Elon Musk. And keep in mind that at the start, Elon only worked on a single company at a time, beginning with Zip2 and then PayPal. It was only after selling PayPal for $1.5 billion that he started trying to do multiple companies at once. Stay focused and work on one company at a time. Problem 5, everything but the kitchen sink. This is the most common problem entrepreneurs face by far and stems from the same issues as working on too many projects at once. Entrepreneurs believe they can do anything, so they want to do everything. It's actually harder and against their nature to focus. Too many features, too many categories, too many markets. They want to be everything for everybody. You can spot these entrepreneurs a mile away by looking at their deck. They have a competitive landscape slide. And on one axis, they have their company and their competitors. And on the other axis, they have a list of features. Each competitor has a few features checked off. For their company, they have a line all the way across. They are trying to boil the ocean. This is an impossible task. The best products and best companies do primarily one thing at the start. Think Rotten Tomatoes, Instagram, Snapchat, YouTube, Twitter. You can't be more of a single thing than Twitter. It's literally a status update. Amazon started with just books. Facebook was just Harvard. Google was just simple web search. Going back to the example of Google. When Google started, Yahoo was huge, but Yahoo was a portal. In other words, Yahoo was everything but the kitchen sink. Yahoo had unlimited resources. Google was a pair of PhD students out of Stanford. Yet Yahoo was beaten by Google at the one thing that Yahoo was supposed to be good at, search. The best companies start off simple and focused. Problem 6, solution looking for a problem. It's very hard to start with a solution and then try to find a problem that it is solving. Because without a problem, it becomes very hard to focus. How do you build out the feature? What category do you target? What market? It's not necessarily the case that every product needs to start with a problem. For example, I'm not sure that Twitter or Snapchat or TikTok started with a problem. That being said, it's much easier to start with a problem. Ideally, a problem that you and your founders are having. And then try to come up with a solution. Starting with a problem first makes it much easier to focus. The last problem is premature scaling. Generally, this only happens when a founder raises too much money too early. It naturally pushes you towards being a perfectionist and building everything but the kitchen sink. You end up overhiring and prioritizing growth before you have product market fit, and end up wasting time and money while being incredibly unfocused. Personally, I would rather have product market fit with a little funding than no product market fit and a lot of funding. Of these 7 common problems entrepreneurs face when trying to focus, I've been through most of them multiple times. So what's the solution? 4 steps. 1, focus. 2, launch. 3, measure. 4, iterate. The first and most important step is to focus. Cut away until it's one feature, one category, one market. This is the opposite of building everything but the kitchen sink. Feature. Pick the feature that is the main thing that people should care about with your product. For Rotten Tomatoes, this was the tomato meter. Category. Choose the category that makes the most sense for your company based on fit, expertise, interest, whatever. For Rotten Tomatoes, this was movies. Market. Go for the lowest hanging fruit. The smaller and more niche the market, the better. With Rotten Tomatoes, we initially started with hardcore movie buffs. I talked earlier about boiling the ocean, but instead of the ocean, we could target a lake. Instead of a lake, a pond, a swimming pool, a bathtub, a pot of water, a glass of water. It's a lot easier to boil a glass of water than trying to boil the ocean. At the start, entrepreneurs generally have extremely limited resources. So reducing the scope of the problem increases the chance of success. And it also allows you to do things faster and cheaper. One way to tell if you've cut enough is to see if you can explain your product in 15 seconds. If it takes 5 minutes to explain, it's too complicated. Ideally, you should be able to explain it to someone and they can explain it right back. For example, Rotten Tomatoes is a site for movie reviews and news. We aggregate reviews from professional critics in one place and then give you a score based on the percentage of critics that recommend seeing that movie. The second step is to build and launch quickly. To do this, you should focus on launching with a minimum viable product. A minimum viable product is a product with enough features to validate a product idea early in the development cycle. This is the opposite of being a perfectionist. The minimum viable product is the equivalent of drawing blueprints before building a house. It's a lot easier to decide to move a room around when you're working with blueprints than after you've built the house. There are a number of approaches to putting out a minimum viable product. One is customer interviews. You can actually validate a product idea just by talking to customers you think are the most likely to use your product. 2, Kickstarter. What's great about Kickstarter isn't just that you can raise money from the platform, it's that you can validate your product idea before actually building the product. If you're working on a hardware startup, I recommend Kickstarter as a potential platform to use. 3, landing page. Landing pages function very similarly to Kickstarter. Make a landing page for your idea, buy Facebook ads, and see if people sign up to get notified when your product launches. One example is Hobolabs that used landing pages. So they wanted to find out in the mid-90s if people would buy cars online without actually being able to test drive them. So they built a website to sell cars. If someone ordered a car, they'd buy the car and have it shipped over at a loss. By doing this, they didn't need to cut deals with dealerships or own inventory. So they were able to answer the question quickly and relatively cheaply. Another example is Perfect Slice. I made up the name for this. In this approach, you manually build out a few examples of your product that give you the biggest bang for your buck and make them the best version that you can. For example, with Rotten Tomatoes, we started by only building pages for the wide release movies that were coming out that week. So it's literally like 3 movies. Finally, doing it manually. Craigslist and AngelList have lists in their name because they started off as mailing lists. Rotten Tomatoes was static HTML. The reviews were gathered in a library because back then, most movie reviews were not available online. If you're trying to launch with your product, you could potentially launch with just email, mailing lists, and Google Sheets. Or for example, if you're trying to launch a game, you could use dice, tokens, cards, pen and paper to test and improve your game before ever writing a line of code. Build a minimum viable product and launch quickly. The next step is to measure. Figure out the single most important metric for your business. For a marketplace play, the most important metric is transactions, getting buyers and sellers to transact. For enterprise, the most important metric is revenue. For a mobile app, it's probably retention and engagement. For Rotten Tomatoes, the most important metric early on was page views. This was before Google AdSense, so we needed to get to 10 million page views per month in order to attract advertisers. An article written recently by one of the founders of Superhuman measured users on how they would feel if they could no longer use your product. This is essentially a measure of product market fit and a great option for being your most important metric. Find the most important metric for your business and start measuring it. The fourth and final step is to iterate. You want to keep iterating on your product. Build and launch, then measure your most important metric, then go back to build and launch, and so on. What you're trying to do is to grow your most important metric. If you get stuck and can't seem to grow it, then pivot. Change the feature, or the category, or the market. Your goal is to get to critical mass, i.e., boil your glass of water. Think of what Facebook did at Harvard before launching into a second school. Literally 100% of the users at Harvard were using Facebook. They were going on multiple times a day and spending hours per day on Facebook before they launched into a second school. If you can get to critical mass, you are well on your way to finding product market fit. In conclusion, product market fit beats all. It beats team, idea, technology, your market size, your PowerPoint presentation, your business plan, your pitch, your patents, etc. I'll end with a quote from Mark Andreessen of Andreessen Horowitz. When you are before product market fit, focus obsessively on getting to product market fit. Do whatever is required to get to product market fit, including changing out people, rewriting your product, moving into a different market, telling customers no when you don't want to, telling customers yes when you don't want to, raising that fourth round of highly dilutive venture capital, whatever is required. When you get right down to it, you can ignore almost everything else. I'm not suggesting that you do ignore everything else, just that judging from what I've seen in successful startups, you can. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.